Look at me for a moment, because this is not just another year, and this is not just another speech. This is the year you stop explaining yourself. The year you stop hoping someone notices your potential. The year you decide that average is no longer acceptable. 2026 is calling you to rise, not slowly, not someday, but now. While others wait for motivation, you move with decision. While others talk, you execute. This is the year you outwork everyone, not to prove them wrong, but to prove to yourself what you're truly capable of. Let me tell you something straight, and I want you to feel this, not just hear it. Every once in a while, life gives you a moment where you don't get to drift anymore. A moment where staying the same costs more than changing. That's what 2026 is. This isn't just another year on the calendar. This is a line in the sand. And once that line is drawn, there's no stepping back without paying a price to your soul. Because think about it. How many years have you told yourself, this will be my year, while secretly leaving yourself an escape route? You tried, but not all the way. You committed, but only when it was convenient. You pushed, but you stopped the moment it got uncomfortable. And listen, there's no shame in that, unless you repeat it again. Because repetition without change is how dreams die quietly. This year demands something different from you. Not more wishful thinking, not louder affirmations with weaker actions. It demands a decision so clear, so deep, so final that your nervous system feels it. A decision that says, I'm done negotiating with myself, because the moment you stop negotiating, everything changes. Your standards change, your behaviors change, your identity changes. See, most people think success comes from motivation. That's a lie. Motivation is unreliable. Motivation shows up when things feel good. Decision shows up when things are hard. And the moment you decide, really decide, your brain stops asking, should I? And starts asking, how do I? That's the shift. That's the line in the sand. In 2026, half effort is no longer allowed, not because the world demands more from you, but because you demand more from yourself. Half effort creates half results, and half results create full frustration. You felt that frustration before, that feeling of knowing you're capable of more but not accessing it, that gap between who you are and who you know you could be. That gap is painful, and pain is a signal. It's telling you it's time to raise your standards. Raising your standards doesn't mean perfection. It means no longer accepting excuses that used to sound reasonable. I'm tired, I don't have time, I'll start tomorrow. Those phrases have cost you years. And here's the brutal truth. Tomorrow is not a strategy. Tomorrow is a hiding place for fear. And in 2026, fear doesn't get to drive anymore. When you draw this line in the sand, you're not saying you'll never struggle again. You're saying quitting is no longer an option. You're saying showing up halfway is no longer who you are. You're saying that even on days when your energy is low, your standards stay high. That's how identity is forged, not in moments of confidence, but in moments of resistance. Let me ask you something important. Who do you become when things don't go your way? Because that's who you really are. Anyone can feel strong when life cooperates, but when the plan falls apart, when the motivation disappears, when nobody is watching, that's when the real you shows up. And in 2026, the real you doesn't retreat. The real you responds. This line in the sand is about finality. It's about saying, I'm done being interested. I'm committed. Interested people watch motivational videos. Committed people change their routines. Interested people wait to feel ready. Committed people move while scared. Interested people talk. Committed people execute. And here's what's powerful. Once you decide at this level, you stop needing external validation. You don't need applause. You don't need permission. You don't even need immediate results, because the decision itself gives you certainty. And certainty is fuel. Certainty keeps you moving when results are delayed. Certainty keeps you disciplined when motivation disappears. Understand this, the world doesn't reward intentions, it rewards standards. And your old standards got you here. If you want a new life, you need a new baseline for what's acceptable. In 2026, what's acceptable is effort with intensity, focus with discipline, action with consistency. Anything less is no longer aligned with who you are becoming. This isn't about becoming ruthless with others. It's about becoming ruthless with your excuses. It's about catching yourself in the moment you want to pull back and choosing to lean in instead. It's about honoring the future version of you who is counting on the decisions you make today. When you draw this line in the sand, something subtle but powerful happens. You stop asking, can I do this? And you start saying, this is who I am. And identity drives behavior. When you see yourself as someone who finishes, who shows up, who does the work, your actions follow automatically. No force required, no hype required, just alignment. 2026 is not asking you to be extreme for a week. It's asking you to be consistent for a year. It's asking you to stop living in potential and start living in proof. And proof only comes from decisions followed by relentless action. So right here, right now, make it real. Not in your head, in your body. Decide that this year you don't step over the line you've drawn. Decide that when things get hard, you get stronger. Decide that half effort no longer represents you. Because once the line is drawn, the only question left is simple. Will you step forward or will you step back? Let's go deeper now, because this is where the real separation happens. Once you've drawn the line in the sand, once you've decided that 2026 is non-negotiable, the next truth hits you hard. Outworking everyone has nothing to do with what people see. It has everything to do with what you do when nobody's watching. That's where greatness is built, quietly, repeatedly, and without recognition. Most people live for the moment of applause. They want to be seen working. They want the post, the credit, the praise. But the truth is, the world doesn't reward what you announce. It rewards what you accumulate. And accumulation only happens in private. The hours before dawn, the extra rep after your body wants to quit, the decision to stay focused when distraction is begging for your attention. That's where the edge is. Because here's the reality. Everyone works hard when they're being watched. Everyone shows discipline when there's a deadline, a boss, a camera, or an audience. But very few people can hold themselves accountable in silence. Very few can push themselves when there is no immediate consequence for quitting. And that's exactly why so few ever break through. When no one is watching, your true standards reveal themselves. Not what you say you value, but what you actually live by. And in 2026, your advantage is simple. You stop needing supervision to perform at your highest level. You become self-driven, self-disciplined, self-regulated. That's power. Think about it. Your competition sleeps in. You get up early. Your competition waits until they feel ready. You move while you're uncomfortable. Your competition stops when it gets boring. You stay long enough to master it. These small decisions look insignificant in the moment, but compounded over time, they create an unbridgeable gap. Silence is where confidence is built. Not the loud, shaky kind that needs validation, but the grounded kind, the kind that comes from knowing you did the work, even when it would have been easier not to. That confidence doesn't announce itself. It shows up in how you walk, how you speak, how you perform under pressure. It's earned, not claimed. Most people overestimate what they can do in a week and underestimate what they can do in a year of quiet consistency. They burn hot and fade fast. You're playing a different game. In 2026, you're playing the long game. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're trying to become someone. And let me tell you something important. Discipline practiced in private creates freedom in public. When you handle your responsibilities without being forced, when you keep promises you make to yourself, you build self-trust. And self-trust is the foundation of confidence. You don't doubt yourself as much. You don't hesitate as often. You don't collapse under pressure because you've proven to yourself that you can be relied on. This is why routines matter, not because they're exciting, but because they remove decision fatigue. When your habits are locked in, you don't wake up wondering if you're going to show up. You already know the answer. You've made showing up automatic, and automation is power. You don't need to do extraordinary things once in a while. You need to do ordinary things extraordinarily well every day. That's the part people skip. They chase breakthroughs without honoring basics. But the basics, repeated relentlessly, are what create breakthroughs. Understand this. Your future isn't built in the big moments. It's built in the quiet ones. The mornings where you'd rather stay in bed. The evenings where quitting feels justified. The days where progress feels invisible. Those moments are votes for the person you're becoming, and every vote counts. When no one is watching, you're either reinforcing discipline or feeding weakness. There's no neutral. Every choice trains you. Every action strengthens something, either your future or your excuses. And in 2026, you become hyper aware of this. You start asking yourself a better question, not what's easy right now, but what strengthens me? Here's the paradox. The more you work in silence, the louder your results become. You don't need to tell people what you're doing. They'll see it in your performance, in your consistency, in your resilience. And one day, they'll call you lucky without realizing how many silent mornings, lonely nights, and disciplined decisions created that luck. This isn't about punishment. It's about pride. Pride in knowing you didn't cut corners. Pride in knowing you didn't wait to be pushed. Pride in knowing you honored your commitment even when it was inconvenient. That kind of pride can't be taken from you. It stays with you. And here's the most powerful part. When you master working without an audience, you become unstoppable because nothing outside of you controls your effort anymore. You don't rise and fall with praise or critic-ism. You're anchored, focused, dangerous in the best possible way. So If you want to outwork everyone in 2026, stop performing and start preparing. Stop announcing and start accumulating. Fall in love with the work no one sees, because when the world finally starts watching, the work will already be done. Now let's talk about the part most people avoid, because this is where real transformation demands honesty. You can draw a line in the sand, you can work in silence, but none of it lasts if you keep dragging the same excuses, the same comforts, and the same old story into a new year. You don't step into a new level of life by holding on to what kept you stuck. Excuses are subtle. They don't sound weak. They sound reasonable. They sound logical. I've been through a lot. I deserve a break. This is just how I am. And the danger is not that these thoughts show up. The danger is when you believe them. Because the moment you justify, you neutralize your own power. You turn temporary discomfort into permanent limitation. Comfort is even more deceptive. Comfort feels safe, familiar, predictable, but comfort is also where ambition slowly suffocates. Nothing dies loudly in comfort. It fades quietly. One skip day becomes a pattern. One compromise becomes a habit. And before you realize it, you're living a life that's far smaller than what you once envisioned. And then there's the old story. The identity you've been rehearsing for years. The story about why you can't, why it's harder for you, why others have an advantage you don't. Stories are powerful, but only if you choose the right one, because the story you tell yourself determines the actions you take, and the actions you take determine the results you get. Here's the truth. Most people never face. Your past explains you, but it does not excuse you. What happened to you matters, but what you do next matters more. You cannot build a future while constantly defending the limitations of your past. At some point, explanation turns into self-sabotage. In 2026, you stop carrying emotional receipts from years that are already over. You stop reliving moments that cannot be changed. You stop using old pain as a reason to stay small, not because it wasn't real, but because it doesn't get to run your life anymore. This is where courage shows up. Courage isn't loud. Courage is the quiet decision to let go of what feels familiar, even when it feels unsafe to do so. Courage is saying, I don't know exactly who I'll become without this excuse, but I know I can't stay who I've been. Comfort tells you to wait. Growth tells you to move. Comfort tells you to protect yourself. Growth tells you to challenge yourself. And every time you choose comfort, you reinforce the identity you're trying to escape. Every time you choose growth, you build the identity you say you want. You don't need to destroy your comfort overnight, but you do need to stop letting it decide for you. You need to become comfortable being uncomfortable, comfortable being challenged, comfortable being in the process without immediate results. That's the price of expansion. And the old story, this is the hardest part to release because it's been with you for a long time. It's shaped how you see yourself. It's given you certainty, even if that certainty has been limiting. But understand this, you can be loyal to your past or you can be loyal to your future, but you can't be loyal to both. Your old story might say you're not disciplined. Your new story says you're learning discipline daily. Your old story might say you always quit. Your new story says you finish what you start. Your old story might say you're behind. Your new story says your timeline is irrelevant because your focus is unstoppable. Identity is not discovered. It's decided. And once you decide, your behaviors begin to align. Not perfectly, not instantly, but consistently. And consistency is what rewrites identity. In 2026, you don't argue with your excuses. You outgrow them. You don't shame yourself for wanting comfort. You simply choose something stronger. You don't fight the old story. You stop feeding it. Because whenever you stop feeding, eventually dies. This is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more of who you really are without the weight of who you thought you had to be, without the labels, without the limitations, without the lies you've repeated so often they started to feel true. There will be moments this year when the old story comes back, when comfort calls your name, when excuses line up with perfect timing. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're growing. And in those moments, you don't need to be heroic. You just need to be honest. Honest about where that road leads, honest about what it costs. Because every excuse you release gives you energy back. Every comfort you loosen frees your focus. Every old belief you let go of creates space for a new level of performance. And momentum builds faster than you think once you stop carrying unnecessary weight. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not incapable. You have simply been loyal to patterns that no longer serve the future you want. And loyalty can be redirected. So in 2026, you don't ask what feels good right now. You ask what moves me forward. You don't ask what's familiar. You ask what's required. And you don't ask, why is this hard for me? You ask, who do I become if I do this anyway? Because the moment you release excuses, comfort, and the old story, there is nothing left between you and the life you've been preparing for except action. If you really want to understand why some people rise no matter what and others collapse the moment pressure shows up, it all comes down to this: they've trained their mind. Not talked about it, not read a quote about it. They've trained it the same way an elite performer trains their body, through repetition, awareness, and intentional control. Because your mind is either your greatest ally or your most dangerous enemy, and it never stops talking. Most people don't realize this, but the voice in your head is coaching you every single day. The question is it coaching you forward or coaching you out of action? That voice is shaping your decisions long before results ever show up. It tells you what something means. It tells you what to focus on. It tells you what to expect. And in 2026, you stop letting that voice run on autopilot. You don't control every thought that enters your mind, but you do control which ones you listen to, which ones you believe, and which ones you act on. That's training, that's discipline, and it's available to anyone willing to practice it. Elite performers don't wait for confidence to show up before they act. They act in ways that create confidence. They know that certainty is not something you find, it's something you build. And you build it by choosing empowering interpretations over limiting ones again and again, especially when things go wrong. Because things will go wrong, plans will break, progress will feel slower than expected. Doubt will show up uninvited. The difference in 2026 is that when doubt shows up, it doesn't get the microphone. You hear it, you acknowledge it, and then you redirect your focus. You train your attention like a muscle. Focus determines emotional stat. Emotional state determines performance. That's the chain. If you focus on what's missing, you feel weak. If you focus on what you can control, you feel powerful. Nothing outside of you changes, but everything inside of you does. And inside is where performance is born. Your language matters more than you think. The words you use with yourself shape your nervous system. They either trigger stress or create strength. Saying I have to feels heavy. Saying I choose to creates ownership. Saying I can't shut stores. Saying I'm figuring this out keeps them open. In 2026, you become intentional with your words, not to sound positive, but to stay powerful. Training your mind also means learning how to manage your emotional state, not suppressing emotions, not pretending you're fine, but knowing how to shift when a state no longer serves you. You learn how to breathe differently, move differently, speak differently, because physiology drives psychology. Change how you use your body and your mind follows. Elite performers don't live in one emotional state. They know how to access focus on demand, calm under pressure, intensity when it's time to execute, recovery when it's time to reset. That flexibility is a skill, and skills can be trained. And here's something most people miss. Discipline is easier when your mind is aligned. When your self-talk supports your goals, you don't need to force yourself as much. Resistance drops, momentum increases. You stop fighting yourself. But if your internal dialogue is negative, chaotic, or self-attacking, everything feels harder than it needs to be. You burn energy arguing with yourself instead of executing. In 2026, that internal war ends. You become your own ally. This doesn't mean you never criticize yourself. It means you do it constructively. You don't say, I'm a failure. You say, that approach didn't work. What's the adjustment? You don't say, I always mess this up. You say, I'm improving with every rep. That's not denial, that's strategy. Your mind believes what you repeat. Repetition creates belief. Belief creates behavior, and behavior creates results. So you become deliberate with repetition. You feed your mind information that strengthens you. You guard your inputs. You choose what you watch, what you listen to, and who you surround yourself with, because environment shapes mindset. In 2026, you don't just react to life. You condition yourself for it. You prepare your mind before the day begins. You review wins instead of only failures. You anchor yourself in purpose before pressure hits. That preparation creates stability, and stability creates performance. The goal is not to eliminate fear, it's to move forward with it. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is deciding that fear doesn't get to decide. And when your mind is trained, fear becomes a signal to focus, not a command to retreat. Every time you redirect a negative thought, you strengthen the muscle. Every time you choose focus over distraction, you strengthen the muscle. Every time you respond instead of react, you strengthen the muscle. And like any muscle, it gets stronger with use. This is how you become dangerous in the best sense of the word, not reckless, not emotional, but centered, controlled, present. When others panic, you adjust. When others complain, you execute. When others quit mentally, you lock in. And understand this, you don't need perfect conditions to perform at a high level. You need a trained mind. That's what allows you to win in imperfect situations. That's what allows you to outlast, outfocus, and outperform. So in 2026, you stop hoping your mindset will improve. You train it daily. You coach yourself intentionally. You build certainty through repetition, because once your mind is trained, nothing outside of you can stop what's already decided inside. There's a truth that levels the playing field for everyone, no matter where you start, no matter what advantages or disadvantages you think you have. And that truth is this: consistency beats talent every single time. Talent is impressive, but it's unreliable. It shows up when it feels like it. Consistency shows up no matter what. And in 2026, that's the game you commit to playing. You've seen it before. People with natural ability who start strong and fade fast. People who get attention early and disappear quietly. And you've also seen the opposite. People who didn't look special at first, who weren't the smartest, fastest, or most gifted, but they kept showing up day after day, rep after rep, and eventually they pass everyone. Why? Because consistency compounds. It stacks. It builds momentum while everyone else is stopping and starting. And momentum, once it's moving, is incredibly hard to stop. Most people are emotionally driven. They work when they feel inspired. They rest when they feel tired. They quit when they feel bored. But emotions are unstable. They change daily. If your performance depends on how you feel, your results will always be unpredictable. Consistency is emotional independence. It's the decision to act regardless of mood. It's the ability to say, I'm doing this because it's who I am, not because I feel like it today. That identity shift changes everything. You don't need to be extreme. You need to be steady. You don't need massive action once in a while. You need focused action every day. That's how ordinary effort turns into extraordinary results over time. Think about it. One workout doesn't change your body. One focused work session doesn't change your career. One good decision doesn't change your life. But repeated daily, those same actions become unstoppable forces. That's the power most people underestimate because it doesn't feel dramatic in the moment. And that's exactly why it works. It's boring enough that most people won't do it. They're chasing intensity. You're building durability. They're chasing breakthroughs. You're building systems. Consistency also builds trust, especially self-trust. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you reinforce the belief that you can be relied on. And that belief becomes confidence, real confidence, not loud, not performative, quiet and grounded. When you break promises to yourself, you weaken that trust. Doubt creeps in, hesitation increases, and suddenly everything feels heavier than it should. In 2026, you protect your self-trust like it's sacred. Because once you trust yourself, execution becomes easier. This is where people get confused. They think consistency means never missing a day. That's not the goal. The goal is never missing twice. You will have off days. You will have setbacks. The difference is you don't let one slip turn into a slide. You return to the standard immediately. That's consistency. You stop judging yourself emotionally and start correcting yourself strategically. No drama, no shame, just adjustment and action. That approach keeps momentum alive. Consistency also removes pressure. When you know you're going to show up again tomorrow, you don't panic about today. You don't rush the process. You stay patient. And patience is a performance advantage in a world addicted to quick results. Talent loves attention. Consistency loves process. Talent wants praise. Consistency wants progress. And in the long run, progress always wins. In 2026, you stop comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 10. You stop worrying about how fast others are moving. You lock into your pace and protect it. Because your only real competition is the version of you that quits early. You also stop underestimating the power of small improvements. 1% better each day doesn't sound exciting, but over a year, it's transformational. Over multiple years, it's unrecognizable. That's how quiet work creates loud results. Consistency trains your nervous system to handle pressure. When you do hard things daily, difficulty stops feeling threatening. It becomes familiar, and familiarity breeds confidence. When challenges come, you don't flinch. You've been training for this. This is why consistency outlasts talent. Talent hasn't been tested as often. Consistency has. Talent breaks under pressure. Consistency adapts. And here's something important. Consistency isn't about grinding yourself into exhaustion. It's about sustainability. It's about creating rhythms you can maintain. You don't burn out doing what you can sustain. You burn out trying to do too much inconsistently. So in 2026, you choose the pace you can maintain, and then you maintain it relentlessly. You show up on the days that matter most, the days you don't feel like it, because those are the days that separate everyone. You don't need to win today. You just need to show up today and then do it again tomorrow. Because in the end, talent gets you noticed, but consistency makes you undeniable. There comes a moment when effort turns into evidence, when preparation becomes presence, when the work you've been doing in silence, CE starts speaking on your behalf. That's the moment you're moving toward in 2026, not because you're chasing attention, but because attention becomes unavoidable when results stack high enough. Most people want to be recognized before they become undeniable. They want credit before they've created value, but the world doesn't work that way. The world responds to proof, and proof is built one disciplined decision at a time. In 2026, you stop trying to convince anyone of who you are. You let your actions do the talking. You let your consistency do the explaining. You let your growth create the narrative. Because when results are real, explanations become unnecessary. Think about how powerful that is, to walk into a room and not need to announce anything, to speak with confidence because you've done the work, to move without seeking approval because you've earned self-respect. That's the kind of presence that can't be faked. This isn't about being loud. It's about being effective. It's about becoming so reliable, so prepared, so sharp, that people feel it when you show up. Your energy changes, your focus changes, your standards change, and others adjust accordingly. When people can't ignore you, it's not because you demanded attention, it's because you've raised the bar. You've become the person others measure themselves against without realizing it. And that only happens when you stop chasing validation and start chasing excellence. Excellence is quiet. It doesn't rush. It doesn't panic. It doesn't need reassurance. It knows the process works because it's been working it every day. And in 2026, you trust the process because you are the process. There will be moments when no one notices your progress, when your effort feels invisible, when your growth feels slow. Those moments are not signs to stop. They're signs you're early. Stay there long enough and the shift will be undeniable. At first, people overlook you. Then they question you. Then they watch you. Then they copy you. And eventually they ask you how you did it without realizing they were watching the result of thousands of unseen decisions. And when that moment comes, you don't gloat, you don't explain, you just keep working, because by then your identity is no longer tied to reaction. It's anchored in execution. You also stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You stop dimming your ambition to avoid standing out. When your results speak, you don't need to apologize for your growth. You don't need to downplay your discipline. You earned it. Being undeniable doesn't mean being perfect. It means being consistent under pressure. It means delivering when it counts. It means showing up prepared while others are still warming up. In 2026, you become known for follow-through, for reliability, for composure. When things get hard, you don't disappear. You become more present. That's what makes people pay attention. That's what builds respect. And here's the truth. When you stop trying to be impressive, you become impressive. When you stop trying to be seen, you become visible. When you stop talking about what you're going to do and you start doing it every day, the world has no choice but to respond. This isn't about competing with others. It's about setting a standard so high for yourself that comparison becomes irrelevant. You measure success by execution, not applause. You'll know you're there when you no longer need motivation to keep going, when momentum carries you, when discipline feels natural, when pressure sharpens you instead of shaking you. That's when you realize you didn't just change your habits, you change your identity, and identity creates gravity. People are drawn to it. Opportunities find it. Trust follows it. In 2026, you don't wait for permission. You don't wait for recognition. You don't wait for confidence. You move with quiet certainty. Because when the work is undeniable, the results are impossible to ignore.